I'll rip your head off and shit down your neck.
Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod. What the hell is that? What the hell is that crap doing on my screen? Ah, much better. Anyway, where was I? Yes, welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round we are checking out Don Ramon's Duke Nukem 3D mod, version 10 if I'm not mistaken. This is being played in combination with a texture replacement pack, which does a real damn good job of drastically changing the feel of these traditional Doom 2 levels here. It's amazing what a fresh coat of paint can do for a place. As for the gameplay itself, you'll note that this is not a simple, straightforward conversion of the Duke 3D enemies and weapons into Doom. The dual-wielded pistols here should have been enough of a dead giveaway on that front. Instead, this takes its inspiration from a wider pool of Duke 3D resources, not just the original 3 episodes of Duke 3D, but even World Tour, and even extending as far as, yes, Duke Nukem Forever. What this all essentially boils down to is a mod that provides you with an extended Duke weapon roster as well as an extended enemy bestiary with which to use them against. As is usually the case with this style of mod, the varying types of either that you'll encounter on any given playthrough will shift around ever so slightly. So if you're in the mood for multiple playthroughs of a map set, you'll discover that no 2 playthroughs are ever quite the same, but simultaneously you'll discover that the encounters contained therein can occasionally feel somewhat off balance. I'd say that this is keenly felt more than anywhere else in the Pig Cop enemy pool, doubly so when playing at higher difficulty. Even in its vanilla form, the Pig Cop can be exceedingly troublesome, decimating your health in relatively short order, doubly so in greater numbers. Combine that with the multiple types available here, some of which include heavily armed and armored variations, and you'll find that some encounters can regularly bring your playthroughs to a very abrupt end. This is compounded somewhat by the fact that Pig Cops are actually really goddamn stingy when it comes to dropping ammo on a successful kill. You'll find your shotgun-based weaponry will run dry on a fairly frequent basis, forcing you instead to rely on the much more plentiful ammo pools of occasionally less effective weaponry. That said, there is an alternative to blasting things in the face with a gun. You do have a relative overabundance of pipe bombs and trip mines, the high number of which explained by the fact that this mod swaps out lesser health pickups and armor pickups for either option respectively. In that regard, if you're a fan of just making things go boom, then this mod has you relatively well covered. Something else that's well worth pointing out is that if you trigger Duke's pickup voice lines just right, you can get him to say, "Come." If anything, the Gauntlet is the level where I started to question the choices made when it came to enemy variants and enemy replacements. I mean, enforcers for chaingunners, perfectly acceptable. You got a few varieties of those. You got ice thrower variants, flamethrower variants, bog standard chaingun variants, but what I will absolutely not goddamn stand for is the sentry bot turning up in anything ever. They sucked in Duke Nukem 3D, they continue to suck outside of Duke Nukem 3D. If anything, it makes me pine for the Duke Nukem Forever swap, where the Pinky's replaced with the feral Pig Cop instead. At least that one doesn't friggin' explode in your face. The focus proves that Pig Cops are still awful in large numbers in confined spaces, and you also get to contend with the Pig Cop captain, who has a chaingun! It's fine. Perfectly fine. Oh look, another sentry drone. Good. You know, as much as I appreciate the variety, I sometimes have to question the wisdom of leaving certain elements of a gameplay mod up to the whims of randomization. As I've already mentioned, it does have a habit of sending certain sections of level off-kilter somewhat when it comes to difficulty, and I just find it odd that despite the fact this is version 10, and it doesn't really have any provisions for customization, being able to turn off certain enemy types, for example. Or maybe even being able to tweak the health pool of certain enemy types. One in particular that comes to mind is the Battle Lord, which replaces the Spider Mastermind. No reason why I'd bring that up. None at all. On the weaponry front, all the usual suspects are present and accounted for, but on top of that, you do get a fair few extra additions. In the pistol slot, for example, you've not just got the pistol, but also dual-wielded pistols, the Blacktail, again, dual-wieldable, and the Desert Eagle, not dual-wieldable. The fuck? The fuck are you playing at? Why even live? In a good old boomstick slot, we have the likes of the double-barreled shotgun, which on closer inspection is pretty much two standard shotgun sprites glued together side by side. Granted, the extra reloading animation helps sell the illusion, and the fact that it delivers a rather satisfying beefy boom certainly doesn't hurt matters either. The assault shotgun gives you rapid-fire damage dealing with an absolute chonker of a magazine that allows you to reel off 16 shots before requiring a reload, something that hopefully you don't have to count with the inclusion of the status bar on screen when using it. The explosive shotgun is pretty self-explanatory. It delivers explosive rounds, and if I'm not mistaken, is modeled on the Spaz 12 shotgun. That right there is pretty much the extent of my real-life weapons knowledge. In terms of the effect, it certainly explodes on contact, but I'm kind of disappointed that it doesn't cause my enemies to fly apart into a jibby, gooey mess. Missed opportunity for sure. The Chaingun cannon slot also contains the LMG, a weapon that has more than a faint whiff of the Quake nailgun to it, albeit in a slightly less satisfying form. We've also got a minigun in the Chaingun slot, one that, as with many miniguns, doesn't quite feel like it's doing justice to the minigun itself. Again, if anyone ever needs reference, all you need to do is watch that one scene from Predator. You know the one. The explosive Chaingun, while admittedly sounding awesome on paper, suffers from pretty much the exact same problem as the explosive shotgun. Where's my goddamn jibs? As it happens, it seems mostly reserved for the likes of more, let's say, propulsive weaponry, such as the RPG, which shares a bunk with the shock cannon, an admittedly quite satisfying weapon that requires a bit of charging before you let loose its projectile, has a rather nice firing effect, and can actually be half-charged if you'd rather let loose the projectile sooner for a slightly less impactful detonation. The Executor shares the same slot as the Devastator, and I'm struggling to find a reason for this one's existence, because when it comes to rapid-fire rocket launching, I'd rather just be using the Devastator. The laser chaingun shows a lot of promise by looking like a big old chonker of a weapon, but in practice it feels kinda disappointing. Heck, even the laser Gatling gun from Time to Kill sounded beefier than this thing. This slot also features the Duke Nukem Forever Railgun, which at least feels like it's got some power behind it, but again, like some other weapons in this roster, you can't help but feel like the whole thing would be improved by the application of ludicrous jibs. The final slot grants us access to the Freeze Thrower, no complaints there. The Incinerator boasts the handy ability to set your enemies aflame and render them unable to return fire, and the Pulse Thrower is also something that exists. All things considered, and despite my obvious misgivings, I much prefer the weaponry side of this mod to the enemy side. And that's because I feel like the enemy portion of it actively works against the rest of it. It's very scattershot in its implementation. Don't get me wrong, the variety is nice, but I feel like this mod would actively benefit from having less variety, because as it currently stands, it is very much pot luck what kind of difficulty curve you're going to be dealing with on a level-by-level basis. I mean, sure, there's a way you could potentially mitigate that without sacrificing all of that enemy variety, but that would require a few sacrifices in its own right. It would require a much deeper look into the balance of the weaponry itself, potentially sacrificing the variety on that front for the sake of a smoother combat experience. But as it currently stands, yeah, the balance just isn't there yet. Mercifully, if you want to experience this mod without having to deal with the Duke 3D enemies, you can in fact do that. That exists as a standalone mod. Unfortunately, it does have a few caveats. Some weapons that don't integrate all that well with vanilla Doom enemies as of yet aren't present, such as the Shrinker and the Expander. And on the gore front, because I like to mix things up with a gore mod every now and again, unfortunately, it is compromised by the fact that enemies still explode in Duke 3D style jibs. At least in Nash Gore, which is a lot of people's preferred gore mod of choice. I did try it out with Bolognese, Had a lot more success with the jibbing, but only after dialing it down to something ridiculous like -5 minimum jib amount, which at that point makes it so practically everything jibs everything else, which, yes, also includes the handguns. Not that that's expressly a bad thing. So there you go, Don Ramon's Duke 3D weapons. Oh Jesus, piss off, piss! What was I trying to say? I was trying to wrap this up. I was trying to be eloquent, but really, when it comes down to it, this mod unfortunately winds up being more of a frustrating experience than I imagine it intends to be. But don't take my word for it. If you feel like testing the waters for yourself, you'll find the link for this mod, as usual, in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, maybe you'd like to gain access to my videos before anyone else. If that's the case, you'll find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future editions of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.